Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, today we'll be taking Sutta number 19 in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is called the Dvedhavitakka Sutta, which is translated the two kinds of thought, or twofold thought. And this sutta takes the form of a Buddha relating his own experience in training his mind before his enlightenment. So occasionally within the discourse collection, we find suttas in which the Buddha speaks about his experience as what we call a bodhisattva, that is an aspirant or a seeker of enlightenment. And whenever he does so, usually it's for the purpose of, let's say it has a pedagogical purpose. That is, the purpose is to impart some kind of instruction to us. Or in other words, the Buddha is like setting himself up as a model for those who are following the path to enlightenment to emulate, to try to follow the same experience or the same type of training that the Buddha himself had to undergo in order to reach enlightenment. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha is going to explain to us the methods that he used for training his thoughts. And so the key word in this sutta, the word that gives that's responsible for the title of the sutta, is the word vitakka. Okay, this word vitakka is based upon, the stem is the word takka, which the way it was used in the Buddha's time takes on the meaning of reasoning or logic. But then the word vi, when it's or the particle vi is prefixed to it to form the word vitakka, and that gives it very much the sense of thinking or thought. And it refers to ordinary thinking as well as to a particular mental function. This is when we come to the Buddhist way of analyzing the mind into distinct mental factors, each with their own function. the word vitakka becomes one of these particular mental functions, which is said to have the task of applying the mind onto its object. And so we see the word vitakka in this special sense used in the formulas for the jhanas. So within the first jhana, there is no thinking going on in the ordinary sense of discursive thinking, reflection, pondering a particular topic, but there is still the mental function of applying or directing the mind onto an object. And that function is ascribed to vitakka. In this case, vitakka, it's often coupled with another word, vichara. Vichara is another one of these mental factors which has the function of, maybe we can say, examining the object or observing the object. The word vichara itself originally meant something like wandering. But this is not the mind that wanders away, the roaming and wandering mind, but it's a mental function which continually anchors the mind onto the object. So vitakka applies the mind to the object, and vichara observes the object. And these two mental functions are present in the first jhana, the first meditative absorption, but they fall away as one moves from the first jhana to the second jhana. So in the second jhana, there's no function of directing the mind onto the object, and no function of the mind examining the object, probably because the degree of concentration has become so strong that there's no longer a need to direct the mind onto the object or to stand apart observing the object. But the mind is completely absorbed in the object, completely focused on the object. So this is the way the word vitakka is used in relation to the jhanas, the meditative absorptions. But in its ordinary usage, the word vitakka, it's very much similar to the English word thought. So it has here not so much the intellectual sense of thought, but rather what I would call maybe the purposive sense or motivational sense. That it's thinking which has a purpose behind it, thinking which is motivated, thinking which is directed towards some kind of goal. And in this sense, vitakka, it's often rendered or equated with another word that occurs in Pali. That word is sankappa. Now, the reason I write this Pali word sankappa, I don't want to confuse you with too many Pali words, but this word has an important role in the Buddha's teaching. Does anybody know what that role is? What is it?
Can I take a guess?
Yeah.
Is that the 5 attributes?
No. What is it? Speak more loudly.
It's the
Right, okay, it's, what she said is correct. It's the second factor in the Noble Eightfold Path is samma sankappa. That means right, sometimes it's translated right thought, or right intention, right purpose, right motivation. And then the opposite of that is called miccha sankappa. That means wrong thinking, wrong purpose, wrong motivation. Okay, and so this sutta, though it's formulated in terms of vitakka, that is thought, it's concerned really with the development of the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, with replacing wrong thought with right thought, wrong purpose with right purpose. And there are different ways in which thought or purpose can function as the second factor of the Noble Path, Noble Eightfold Path. One, we could say, is the way one formulates one's purposes at the very outset of training in the Noble Eightfold Path, or something that one repeatedly reminds oneself, of which one repeatedly reminds oneself every day, for example. So, at some point every day, one can remind oneself that it is one's purpose in applying the Noble Eightfold Path or following the Noble Eightfold Path to overcome wrong thought, wrong purpose with right purpose, right motivation. But even though one establishes this right motivation at the beginning of one's training, even though one repeats it on a day-by-day basis, but still in the course of one's day-to-day life, and even when one is supposedly sitting quietly in meditation, but sometimes wrong thoughts or wrong purposes, wrong motivations arise. So that in order to train the mind, we have to recognize these wrong thoughts, wrong motivations, and then we have to find a way to weaken them, and then to replace them with right purpose, right aim, right thinking. And so in this sutta, the Buddha is going to describe how he did that. Okay, so he starts off by saying, before my enlightenment, while I was still only a bodhisattva, not yet enlightened, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes, two groups. So here you could see that the Buddha is training his mind, and in order to assist himself in the training of the mind, he comes to a recognition that thoughts fall into two classes. Usually our minds just run from thought to thought. We have different aims, different purposes, but we don't yet really see and understand what I would call the ethical implications of these thoughts, where they are leading us, whether they are leading us to suffering, to affliction, to bondage, or whether they're capable of leading us to purity, to freedom, to enlightenment. Okay, but now the Buddha, as a bodhisattva, he's one who set out seeking enlightenment, and he recognizes the need to distinguish these thoughts, to distinguish them in terms of their ethical quality, and to recognize where they are leading, what their ultimate impact will be on himself and on others. And so he now establishes, in order to make a very neat, concise scheme, he lays out 3 kinds of unwholesome thoughts and 3 kinds of wholesome or beneficial thoughts. Okay, the 3 kinds of unwholesome thoughts are thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will. This would include anger, hatred, resentment, and thoughts, here it's translated cruelty, but maybe cruelty is a little too narrow. A broader meaning might be harming, thoughts of harming others. And then he set on the other side the 3 opposite kinds of thoughts. The first is translated here, thought of renunciation. But I'm going to explain how I think it's possible that this might actually be, how to call this, a wrong representation of that Pali word because of the process of textual transmission. I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. Now, usually in Buddhism, when we speak about the 3 unwholesome roots, what are the 3 unwholesome roots? Right, greed, hatred, and delusion. And so it might seem a little puzzling at first why we don't have the unwholesome thoughts set out as thoughts of greed, okay, sensual desire, greed, almost synonymous. Thoughts of ill will, thoughts of hatred would be almost synonymous. But we say deluded thought and thought of cruelty, not very close, not very similar. So why don't we have thoughts of delusion here? Doesn't it seem like something is missing?
Delusion is not a thought.
Actually, that's a good...
Self-delusion?
No, that would be an extreme, yeah. But there's another reason I have in mind.
Well, I think the delusion is the quality of the thought, not what the thought is about. No?
Actually, that's a good point too, though it's not exactly what I had in mind. We say that delusion is certainly it's a quality, let's say, it's often associated with thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will. Did you?
I was thinking the truth and untruth and the discovery in that direction. Maybe it's not that it's delusion, it's more about discovery.
Yeah, but then why wouldn't there be thought of untruth or untrue thought? Wait, Jin will give you the microphone.
I think it's because delusion is not easily to be recognized at the very beginning.
Actually, that's a very good point too. But again, it's not quite what I had in mind. Maybe somebody has to read my mind to know what I have in. Let us say is delusion in some way included in the wrong noble, it's not the wrong Eightfold Path in some form. Did you raise your hand? No?
Mindfulness, are you relating it to
No.
Vichaditi?
That's what I was looking for. Michaditi, it's what?
Wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong view. So wrong view isn't quite the same as delusion, but we could say that wrong view, it's a kind of manifestation of delusion or an outgrowth of delusion. So already wrong view is being corrected by the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. that is by right view. So when one has right view, that is countering delusion. Even though delusion, it's very deeply rooted, so delusion is only completely eliminated when one reaches the end of the path, that is true knowledge or enlightenment. But already when one acquires the right view, one is activating that particular path factor that is opposed to delusion. And so delusion, I would say, refers, both delusion and wrong view refer to understanding. It's a kind of distorted, let's say delusion is lack of right understanding, and wrong view is a crystallization of wrong understanding. It's a concrete manifestation of wrong understanding. But when there's wrong understanding, distorted understanding, that will have an impact on our motivations, that will affect our purposes, our aims. And so we have to deal with this motivational side of the mind. It's almost a separate exercise. And so that's why there comes the separate training in developing right view. But then a question comes up that cruelty and ill will seem to be very closely associated. So what exactly is the difference between them? Why are the two?
What is thought and what is action?
Well, here they're both taken as thoughts. Yeah. I would say that what's translated cruelty here, in fact, maybe you're getting warm, that it manifests in the form of action. In a way, I'd say, yeah, that you're on the right track, though it's not exactly. Excuse me?
Well, I was making a joke. I'm not exactly wrong.
Yeah, well, anyway, maybe I'll just give my explanation. And this is my understanding. It doesn't come in the text itself, or not even in the commentary. But there's a tendency for this third factor to express itself in action, in harming of others. Whereas ill will is more a kind of emotional state of the mind.
One be thinking about it and the other enjoying thinking about it?
I think the word cruelty in English suggests the enjoyment of inflicting harm on others, which is one reason why I don't think it's a perfectly satisfactory translation of the word. The original Pali word is vihingsa, which means simply harming others or inflicting harm on others. So it doesn't imply anything that necessarily imply getting enjoyment out of that or a kind of sadistic pleasure from it. But it doesn't definitely imply a certain tendency that breaks out in the form of action. And so we have the Pali word is avihingsa, but many of you will probably have heard it in a slightly different form. It's almost been absorbed into English. The Pali word that's translated here cruelty or harming is vihingsa, but this is really, the stem is hingsa with the prefix v, which just has the effect of strengthening it a little bit. So it means harming or harmfulness. And the negation of this, what is translated here as non-cruelty, in Pali it's avihingsa. But if we just leave out the prefix, then we have ahingsa. We don't have to use the